So without further ado, I jumped into action by explaining my recent past, starting with the Saturday last week when I attended the football game. I told her every detail, from my back number over the warm-up exercises to the start of the game, and subsequently what I remembered of this accident that happened during the game. I could recall it way better now than days before, but this memory behaved just as if it had happened a year ago and not a couple of days. This amnesia effect somehow affected both short-term and long-term, but luckily I had major gaps only regarding this one incident. Every other memory was perfectly fine, otherwise they surely had a different treatment for me. However, while I was talking line after line, more and more approaching the now moment, I perceived that she stuck to my lips like glue. And even while narrating the story, I had to confess that no other person gave me that degree of attention she gave me in this moment, as well as in the time leading up to that moment. Of course, attention depends on topic, so people are sometimes more and sometimes less attentive. But regardless of what I explained, she followed me all the way to the present moment. She appeared almost intrigued by the sentences I spoke, but the explanation for that perception also could have been this hype state I found myself in. When she noted that my story inclined towards the end, she took the line of speech and asked me how long I was playing football. After a couple of moments, I guessed, 7 years probably? I also played football in a girls' team not far away from here, but I quit it some years ago because... does that mean you also have a favorite team? A little bit unnerved due to that strange transition she made, I replied that of course I had a team I loved to pursue. Before I gave her an answer, I made sure that the following name of the club made sense to her. Do you also have one? I asked, interrupting the usual sequence of question and answer. Sure, but primarily tell me yours. Alright, I replied before I took a deep breath. While I pushed my breath away, I spoke the 2 words of my favorite club, Real Madrid. She flinched a bit as I said those words, but before I wondered too much about that, I returned the question. So what is the club you have chosen? Well, you already mentioned it, she answered, visibly intrigued. As a result, my level of fascination about that unforeseen commonality raised tremendously, and I asked further. So what is your favorite player then, since there are so many stars there? She sighed. I think Karim Benzema or Isco. Oh, Karim Benzema. I have many jerseys of him and his back number 9, I added promptly. But however, my favorite player is Gareth Bale. His shooting skills and his velocity are just out of this world, I expressed in exhilaration. She smiled and justified why she liked her player so much. Benzema is just one of the most dangerous strikers out there, and Isco is unstoppable once he receives the ball. I nodded, since I knew exactly what she was talking about. And do you like Cristiano? I introduced her to a little bit of controversy. I mean, he's either admired or condemned by football fans, so which side do you choose? I think he and Lionel Messi are the first players you think about when you hear the term football. So in my opinion, there are no reasons for hating one of them. Both are incomparable, but to choose one side, I would go with the one pro Ronaldo. But that doesn't mean that I'm against Messi. I just love it when they're playing against each other and show their skills. I absolutely agree, I answered. But I hate it when those people like Sergio Ramos or their former defensive player Pepe try to destroy Messi by tackling in an unnecessary way. Yes, this is definitely not what the Clásico should stand for, she admitted. It's just the ambitions of both teams that boil over. But anyways, talking about the Clásico, we also have the other rivalry, the Derby Madrileño. And regarding that, we have witnessed an interesting match not that long ago. Do you remember? Certainly I remember. That was my favorite match of this entire year, she replied ecstatically. The Champions League final, in which they somehow won, even though they were 1 goal behind over 70 minutes. So you remember well, I concluded. The header of Sergio... Suddenly we were interrupted by a loud knocking sound outside the door. Both knowing that it's highly likely the nurse to pick me up, she laid herself down on the pillow and smiled into my direction. I remained in an upward position and catched my breath after this intensive dialogue. As the door opened, a nurse entered, just like both of us telepathically expected. The nurse entered, greeted both of us, and came straight to my bed and said what the matter was. So, Aaron, are you ready for the X-ray scan? Yeah, why not? What could probably happen? I responded calmly. Then stand up slowly and follow me. I get you there, she continued. I complied and raised myself carefully, knowing that walking and the other upright activities are things I had to get used to again. Until now, my only walks were directed to the bathroom, and to be honest, afterwards I felt as exhausted as if I had run a marathon. So I never had the power nor the determination to go for a walk. Beyond that, I would have likely scared the other patients with my mummy look. But however, this is my first time walking after a while. So I walked right towards the nurse, expecting me outside. As I passed the bed of my neighbor, she whispered, "Good luck," and waved at me simultaneously. I smiled and returned the wave before I left the room. On the way to the radiology station, I felt a little bit nervous under the circumstance that it was my first time inside this computer tomography thing, whatever. Until now, I only knew it from television, where it is depicted as a 2-meter long tube in which you're being pushed. So after a slow walk of 5 minutes for 2 floors with an elevator, I have reached my destination and was delivered to another doctor. It almost looked like a space capsule as I compared based on my memory and the glance I had in real life in this moment. He greeted me kindly and gave me instructions. According to him, my first task was to lay onto this strange table he was going to push inside the tube, and so I did. Stay calm. In a couple of minutes everything will be over, he told me further as he pushed me softly into this machine. I will leave the room and look after the control panel, while you just remain in that position doing nothing except for breathing. I heard the door open and close a few moments later. That's when I knew that I was alone. But what I also knew at the same time was that the space I had inside was narrow like a Formula 1 cockpit for me 5 years ago. It really looked like an alien abduction when I saw those massive lamps burning down and just absorbing me. I was really glad when I heard the door handle again, hoping that it was the doctor again, getting me out of here finally. But for the first seconds after his entrance, he stayed silent. I thought about asking him if he could get me out of here, but then I remembered that he instructed me to stay calm. After all, my last intention was to influence any results or measurements, so I bit my tongue for a minute longer. Because then he pulled the platform with me on it back out of this X-ray device. He summarized that I will get the results tomorrow, and that I should wait for the nurse he called upon to guide me back to my room. So I stayed for a couple of moments longer, until a second person came inside to pick me up. The doctor seemed quite occupied, so that he missed my goodbye completely. But anyways, the nurse who picked me up delivered me back to my bed and advised that I'd rather rest it for a bit. And that's what I fulfilled by throwing myself on the bed, and with a loud exhale, I covered myself with the blanket. This whole incident made me weaker than my grandpa, but unlike his case, things improve over time. I turned myself positive. I looked to my right when I saw my neighbor again, smiling at me. Consecutively, she nodded, as if she was about to say that it was okay if I slept for a bit. The last thing I remembered was the door closing and her smile, wishing me good night.